The sound of the phone ringing echoed through the vast mansion, piercing the tense silence like a knife. The old, polished floors gleamed under the dim lights, and the opulent walls once filled with the laughter of a powerful family now stood witness to an eerie stillness. It was in this silence that the call came through. The voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm, as if the news they were about to deliver wasn't the kind that would shake the very foundations of the world. "Mr. Barrington is dead." It wasn't the words themselves, but the finality in them that left no room for doubt. The renowned billionaire, Marcus Barrington, who had built an empire that spanned continents, was gone. And just like that, a colossal machine that had been running at full speed for decades screeched to a halt. What happened? The voice on the other end barely gave a moment's pause. "Heart attack," they replied, sounding indifferent, almost rehearsed. Heart attack. To the public, it was a tragic, yet somewhat unsurprising end for the man who had lived life on his terms. A man who had never cared much for his health, always consumed by his work, constantly in the media spotlight, always on the move. But to those closest to him, it felt like something more, a shadow lurking in the corner of his grand life, hidden behind the extravagant wealth, the glitzy parties, the speeches about philanthropy. Something darker, something much more dangerous, was at play, and that was just the beginning. As the world erupted in grief and shock over the death of Marcus Barrington, a storm was quietly brewing within the walls of his sprawling estate. Inside, his family gathered, each member trying to come to terms with the loss in their own way, but there was a sense of unease hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. Jessica Barrington, his only daughter and the presumed heir to his fortune, stood by the grand staircase, staring at the photographs of her father that adorned the walls. Each picture told a story: his rise from nothing to something, from a poor boy in a dilapidated city to the king of an empire. But now, with his sudden death, she couldn't help but feel like a pawn in a game she never understood. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "He was the best to Jess," said Robert Barrington, her estranged cousin and once trusted confidant. Robert had always been a distant figure in her life, but now, with the future of the Barrington Empire hanging in the balance, he was here, standing at her side like a silent predator, ready to pounce. Jessica turned to face him. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice cold, betraying none of the turmoil she felt inside. "What are you really here for?" Robert's lips curled into a half-smile, his eyes glinting with something that Jessica couldn't quite place. "You know what this means, right? The inheritance, the empire. It's all coming down to us now." Jessica took a step back, suddenly realizing the weight of his words. Her mind raced. She knew the stakes were high. Marcus Barrington was one of the wealthiest men in the world, and whoever controlled his empire would control a vast network of businesses, properties, and investments. But that wasn't what worried her the most. It was the fact that her father had always kept everything a secret. His wealth, his dealings, his personal life, it was all hidden behind a veil of mystery. There were rumors, there were whispers, and now, with his death, it seemed like the shadows were finally ready to reveal themselves. The air in the estate grew even thicker as more family members arrived. Uncle Gregory, the ruthless businessman with ties to unsavory figures, walked into the room with a cocky grin plastered across his face. Behind him was Aunt Lydia, who had been married to Marcus's closest friend, now deceased, but had never quite made peace with the idea that she would be pushed aside in favor of a blood relative. It was the arrival of the last guest that truly set things in motion. An unknown figure, a young man, barely in his 20s, stepping into the room with the same confident demeanor as a billionaire. He was tall, sharply dressed, and, despite his youth, exuded a strange calmness that unsettled everyone. "Who the hell are you?" Jessica asked, stepping forward to confront him. The young man didn't flinch. "I'm Lucas. I'm your brother." The room fell silent. The word brother hung in the air like a dark cloud. Jessica stared at him, her mind struggling to make sense of the words. Her father, Marcus Barrington, had never once mentioned a son. There had been no signs, no rumors, no indication that such a person even existed. And yet, here he was, claiming to be her brother. It was a punch to the gut, a revelation that cracked the surface of everything she thought she knew about her father, her family, and her future. "This is impossible," Robert muttered under his breath, his face contorting with disbelief. But Lucas was unfazed. "The will," he said simply. "It's all in the will. I'm the heir." The shockwaves from Lucas's revelation spread like wildfire. While the rest of the family exchanged stunned glances, Jessica felt as if the room were spinning. She had heard rumors over the years, whispers about Marcus's secretive life, about a woman he had loved before her mother, about a child he had abandoned, a son who had vanished without a trace. But she had never believed them. It was impossible, right? Her father, a man who had worked so hard to build everything, wouldn't leave a piece of his fortune to some unknown son, would he? "What's your proof?" Jessica asked, forcing herself to sound calm. But inside, she was anything but. Lucas smiled faintly and pulled out an envelope, sealed and stamped with Marcus Barrington's signature. He handed it to her. "The will," he said again. "You'll see for yourself." As Jessica opened the letter, the weight of the moment pressed down on her. The paper was thick, formal, and as she read the words, everything she knew about her father began to unravel. The will confirmed it. Lucas was indeed Marcus's son, and he was entitled to a portion of the Barrington fortune. Not just a small portion, but a controlling share of the business empire. It was in this moment that everything changed. The family's wealth, power, and legacy, things they had all fought for and believed were theirs by right, were now under threat. Jessica, Robert, Gregory, Lydia, none of them had expected this. And the sudden appearance of Lucas, with his claim to the empire, set the stage for an all-out war. But there was something even darker at play. As the family members continued to argue, the truth began to slip through the cracks. There were questions, too many questions that no one seemed to have answers for. Why had Marcus kept Lucas hidden for so long? Why hadn't anyone in the family ever heard of him? And why, after all these years, was he now suddenly appearing, claiming what was rightfully his? Beneath the surface of this shocking revelation, something was terribly wrong. Lucas wasn't just here to claim his inheritance, he was here to unearth a dangerous secret, one that could bring the entire Barrington empire to its knees. And that secret was buried deeper than anyone could ever imagine. As Jessica stood there, clutching the will, she felt the weight of the coming storm. The walls seemed to close in on her. Her life was no longer just about inheritance or family ties, it was about survival. And with each passing moment, it became clearer that the man who had built this empire had left more than just a fortune behind. He had left a legacy of lies, deceit, and deadly secrets. Now, the clock was ticking. The family's dirty secrets were about to be uncovered, and no one was safe. The wind howled outside the mansion, making the thick curtains sway. Inside, the tension was palpable. The death of Marcus Barrington had already set a series of events in motion, and no one knew how deep the shadows ran. His sudden demise had shaken the family to its core, and now, with Lucas claiming his inheritance, the family was on the brink of a war, one that would tear apart the very fabric of the empire he had built. But there was more to the story than anyone could have imagined. Much more. The reading of Marcus Barrington's will had been scheduled for the following day, but the unease in the house was so thick that it could be cut with a knife. The family had gathered in the grand library, the atmosphere heavy with suspicion and fear. Jessica stood at the head of the table, her fingers drumming anxiously on the armrest of her chair. Across from her sat Robert, his face inscrutable, his eyes darting around the room, taking in every detail. Uncle Gregory, who had been quiet since Lucas's revelation, finally broke the silence with a sharp, almost mocking laugh. "I can't believe this, a hidden son. A bastard, no less, and now he's here to take what's mine." The words hung in the air thick with venom. Gregory had always been the kind of man who believed that power and wealth were his birthright. He had spent years trying to manipulate Marcus into sharing his fortune, but now, with Lucas's arrival, everything was in jeopardy. Jessica could see the anger and fear brewing in his eyes, but what truly unsettled her was how coldly he spoke about the situation, as if the life of her father meant nothing compared to the Empire's future. "You should be careful, Uncle," Jessica said, her voice a chilling whisper. "You're forgetting who runs this family now." Her gaze flicked to Lucas, who was sitting quietly at the far end of the room. His eyes were dark, calculating, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was studying each of them with a predator's gaze, sizing them up. Despite his calm demeanor, Jessica couldn't ignore the way he seemed to hold the cards in his hand. He was no ordinary heir. There was something about him, something hidden that made her uneasy. As the hours passed and the tension grew unbearable, the family was finally called into the lawyer's office to hear Marcus's will. The air in the room felt suffocating as they all waited in silence. The lawyer, a stern, middle-aged man who had been handling the Barrington estate for years, stood behind his desk. His expression was grim, but his eyes flickered nervously as he glanced at Lucas. "We're gathered here today to read the will of Marcus Barrington," the lawyer began. His voice was steady, but Jessica could sense the unease in it. It is clear from his instructions that he had very specific plans for the distribution of his assets. However, there are some details that are particularly noteworthy. The lawyer paused, looking at Lucas, then at the rest of the family. "Mr. Barrington's wishes are clear, and his instructions are binding. But as you all know, Marcus was not a man who lived by the rules of others. He was a visionary, a man who saw the world in ways no one else could. And his will reflects that vision." He began to read aloud, and as the words filled the room, it became clear that Marcus had left behind more than just money and property. He had left behind a puzzle, a legacy of secrets that no one had been prepared for. The first surprise came when the lawyer revealed that the Barrington family estate was no longer solely in Jessica's hands. Lucas was named as the joint heir, but with one crucial stipulation. Lucas will assume full control of Barrington Enterprises upon reaching the age of 30, at which point he will be given the authority to make all decisions regarding the family's business interests, investments, and assets. Until then, Jessica will remain in charge, but under his guidance. There was a collective gasp in the room, and Jessica's heart sank. She had always been groomed to take over the empire, to run it with the same ruthless efficiency her father had shown. But now, with this clause in the will, her position was no longer certain. Her eyes shifted to Lucas, who remained eerily calm. He seemed to be absorbing the news with a sense of quiet satisfaction, as if he had already known what was coming. The lawyer continued reading, his voice unwavering despite the growing tension. In addition to this, Marcus Barrington had set aside a substantial portion of his fortune for a project he had been working on in secret for the past several years. The project, known only as the Foundation, is to be led by Lucas Barrington. It is a venture that Marcus believed would change the world. Its purpose, its true nature, remains unknown. The mention of the Foundation sent a shiver down Jessica's spine. She had never heard of it. No one in the family had. Marcus had always kept his business dealings close to the chest, but this was something new, something that felt dangerous. "What is this foundation?" Robert asked, his voice tight with suspicion. "I don't know," the lawyer replied, looking uncomfortable. "I only know that Marcus had been working on it in secret for several years. It's clear from the will that he believed in its potential. But no one, not even I, was privy to its full details." Jessica's mind raced. What was her father involved in? Why had he kept this secret from the family? And why had he trusted Lucas, this stranger, to carry on such a monumental project? The will continued with further revelations, none of which brought any comfort. Marcus had left behind a series of encrypted files, hidden in a private vault that only Lucas had access to. The vault was located in a remote location, far from the family estate, and Lucas had been given explicit instructions to open it only when the time was right. As the lawyer finished reading the will, Jessica's mind was spinning. There were so many unanswered questions, too many to count. But one thing was clear: her father's death was not just an ordinary passing. It was a catalyst, a trigger for something much larger, something far more dangerous. That night, as the family gathered in the grand dining room for a tense meal, Jessica found herself unable to focus on anything except the mystery of the foundation. What had Marcus been working on? Why had he hidden it from everyone? And what was Lucas's true role in all of this? As if reading her mind, Lucas turned to her. "I know you're wondering about the foundation," he said, his voice smooth and deliberate, "but you'll have to wait. I can't reveal anything until the time is right. But I promise you, Jessica, once you know the truth, you'll understand why my father trusted me with this." His words were as chilling as they were intriguing. There was something about the way he spoke that made Jessica uneasy. It wasn't just the calmness in his voice, nor the way he seemed so certain. It was the undertone of secrecy, of hidden agendas, that unsettled her. "You're playing a dangerous game," Jessica muttered under her breath. But Lucas heard her. He smiled faintly. "Dangerous, maybe, but it's the only game that matters." As the conversation continued, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled into something far beyond her control. The empire, her father's legacy, Lucas, and the mysterious foundation. It was all too much, too many pieces, and not enough answers. Later that night, in the solitude of her room, Jessica couldn't stop thinking about the encrypted files. She needed to know what her father had been hiding. She couldn't afford to let Lucas control everything. If she was going to reclaim her place at the top of Barrington Enterprises, she needed to know the truth no matter what it cost. But as she lay in bed, her phone buzzed. The message on the screen was from an unknown number. "Meet me at the old warehouse tomorrow night. I have something that will change everything." The message was short and cryptic, but Jessica knew instinctively that it was tied to the mystery of the foundation. Someone knew something, someone who wanted to take down the Barrington Empire, and Jessica realized, with a chilling certainty, that the game was only beginning. The next day, Jessica arrived at the old warehouse, her heart pounding with anticipation. She had no idea who had sent the message, but she was ready to find out. As she stepped inside, the door creaked shut behind her. The shadows were thick, the air stale, and the only sound was the echo of her footsteps on the concrete floor. A figure emerged from the darkness, cloaked in a long coat. It was a man, his face obscured by a hood. "You're here," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Good. I have information that will change everything you know about your father's legacy. But you have to trust me." Jessica's heart raced. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. "Tell me," she demanded, her voice firm. "What do you know about the foundation?" The man stepped closer, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Your father wasn't just a businessman. He was involved in something far more dangerous than anyone realized, and now you're all caught in a game that's already been set in motion. The real question is, how far are you willing to go to uncover the truth?" The suspense was unbearable, and Jessica felt a chill run down her spine as the man's words hung in the air. The truth was closer than she realized, but so was the danger. And as the night stretched on, the game of power, secrets, and deception was about to reach its most thrilling, deadly point. The real battle for the Barrington Empire had just begun. The clock ticked relentlessly as Jessica paced back and forth in her room, her mind racing with questions. The cryptic message she had received the night before had set a new course of action in motion, one that led her directly into the heart of her father's darkest secrets. The meeting at the warehouse had only deepened the mystery, and now there was no turning back. She had to uncover the truth, even if it meant stepping into a dangerous game she wasn't sure she was ready for. What was the foundation? Why had Marcus Barrington gone to such lengths to keep it hidden? Who was the mysterious figure who had met her in the warehouse? And why was he so intent on pulling her into this web of secrets? As the sun began to set, casting an eerie glow over the city, Jessica stood by her window, looking out over the sprawling estate her father had built from the ground up. It was no longer the place of safety and security it once was. The empire was teetering on the brink of collapse, and she was no longer certain who could be trusted, especially not Lucas. The following day, Jessica received another message, this time from an unknown number, urging her to meet at an undisclosed location. The message was simple: "You're running out of time, the truth awaits you. But you must hurry, before it's too late." Her heart pounded as she stared at the screen. Whoever was behind these messages knew far more than they were letting on. There was no choice now, she had to follow the trail. She gathered her things and left the mansion under the cover of darkness, determined to find the answers she needed. The car ride to the meeting point felt like an eternity, each minute dragging on as Jessica's mind raced. What was she walking into? What had Marcus been involved in that had led to his death? And most importantly, what was the role of the Foundation? When Jessica arrived at the address, she found herself standing before an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. The area was deserted, the streets empty. A chill ran down her spine as she approached the entrance. The building looked dilapidated, as though it hadn't been used in years. She stepped cautiously inside, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The air was thick with dust and decay. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the distance, and a figure emerged from the darkness. "You came," the figure said in a low, gravelly voice. It was the same man from the warehouse. Jessica tensed. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to remain calm. The man's face was hidden in the shadows, but his eyes gleamed with a cold intensity. "The truth is far more dangerous than you realize, Jessica. The Foundation was never about money or power. It was about control over everything." Jessica's mind spun. Control over what? My father, what was he involved in? The man stepped forward, and Jessica could finally see his face. It was familiar, but she couldn't place it. He looked like someone from her past, someone she had seen at one of her father's events years ago. But why was he here now? "Your father was a visionary, Jessica," the man continued. "But he was also a man of secrets. The Foundation was his final legacy, one that would change everything. But the problem was, he couldn't control it, and now it's out of his hands." "It's in yours." Jessica's breath caught in her throat. "In mine," she could barely process his words. "How could it be in my hands? What do you mean?" The man paused, studying her for a long moment. "Because, Jessica, you are the key. Your father's vision was incomplete without you. He built the foundation to change the world, but only you can unlock its true power. That's why he trusted Lucas. That's why he kept everything from you. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but they didn't make sense. What could this foundation possibly be? Why had her father hidden everything from her? And why was she suddenly at the center of it all? The man's voice dropped to a whisper. The foundation isn't just a project, it's an organization, a network, a shadow government, if you will. And it's already been set in motion. Lucas is just the puppet. And you, Jessica, are the only one who can take control. Before Jessica could process the enormity of his words, the building's door slammed shut behind her. She spun around, her heart racing. Two more men had appeared, blocking the exit. You think you can just walk away with the truth? One of them sneered. Jessica's mind raced, her instincts kicking into overdrive. What is this? She demanded, taking a step back. The man she had spoken to earlier raised a hand to silence her. You don't understand, Jessica. This is the beginning. The foundation has already chosen its path, and you're either with it or against it. Her pulse quickened. So you want me to join you? No, the man said coldly. We don't want you to join us. We want you to lead us. It hit her like a ton of bricks. They weren't after her father's wealth or power. They wanted something far more dangerous. They wanted her to take her father's place, to lead the shadow organization he had built. But why, and why now? Suddenly, Jessica understood. The foundation was not just an organization. It was a force of power that had been lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to rise. And her father had known that it would need someone stronger than him to take over. Someone with a vision, someone like Jessica.